What makes the ultimate comic book series? Is it Superman? Is it politics and religion? Is it sci-fi? Or is it Jonathan Hickman? Hey guys, today we're going to be talking all things comics. We're back with another comic book catch-up. It's our monthly series we do where we catch you all up on what we've been reading recently in the comic book world. Today we're going to be discussing Superman Lost, The Invisible Kingdom, Marvel's Ultimate Spider-Man and Black Panther, maybe also Ultimate X-Men, we'll see. The Rise of the House of X, Avengers Inc. Incorporated, I don't know, and more. I can't wait to get into this one, guys. You know me, I'm Joshua Noel. I'm your big Diz nerd, bunch of other stuff. You know me. You know who we are. You know Will Rose, your favorite X-Men comic book fan. Maybe. But that might just be because you haven't met yet. The one and only Andy Walsh. Hey, Will, would you introduce our new guest, everybody?
Yeah, you're going to hear a new voice on today's episode, Andy Walsh. Andy, we met through some convergence of faith and science, friends and grants and projects and things. And then Andy wrote a book on faith and science and used a plethora of geek references when it comes to sci-fi and comics and X-Men. And so Andy and I bonded super hard on that. And he went on a little book tour. We brought him in and did some podcasts with Trip and with others. And so when we're talking about like expanding the voices on this show and hosts, I said, I know someone who geeks out on sci-fi and faith and science and comics and fellow X-Men. So I was like, hey, we have to bring Andy on. So Andy is here. Andy, share us a little bit who you are. Where's home base for you? What do you do for a living? What have you been doing since the pandemic, since we've talked last?
Sure. So I live in Pittsburgh. I've been here for a long time, almost 20 years. Married, have two kids, a senior and a junior in high school. So very exciting times for college and all those kind of stuff. I work for a public health software company. So we collect electronic data from hospitals and try to help public health departments sort through that and identify useful patterns and track, I don't know if there's some kind of pandemic going on, figuring out where it's the worst, where it's the best, how to manage resources, all that kind of stuff. So that's been a little bit of a time sink the past few years. That's kind of what I've been most busy with, is working on that. And, in my free time, one of the things I've been doing is keeping up on the comic books, mostly Marvel. I'm a little bit of a Marvel zombie, but the Unlimited app makes it real convenient to just get a nice dose of comics fill every week.
Yeah, and your scientific study and degree and research, where does that hone in on for you?
Yeah, so I was a biology student. I studied biology as an undergrad, got into the biology of infectious diseases as a graduate student in the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. Mm-hmm. Wasn't the best in terms of the lab work, keeping things alive. The things that needed to stay alive tended to die. The things that needed to, contaminants that needed to stay out tended to flourish. So I wasn't the best in the lab, but I could, write some code and do some data analysis. And so kind of transitioned into statistical modeling of disease dynamics and things like that. And that ultimately led me to this software company where I've been for over 15 years now.
You don't work for Orcus, do you?
I do not. No, we are the good computer folks. No AI, no.
Yeah, that's an X-Men reference for all you folks out there. And the name of Andy's book is Faith Across the Multiverse, and you can find it on Amazon, different places. And it really is a cool book of how to integrate faith and science, and use a lot of pop culture references and geeky references from Indiana Jones, Joshua, to the X-Men. So yeah, check out that book if you're interested in those subjects. It really helps kind of bridge a lot of things together and make connections that I think are really, really neat.
Yeah, thanks. Right.
And if you enjoy our podcast, not just our YouTube, then go over to Podchaser or Spotify or Apple Podcast, rate and review the show. Let us know what you think of what we're doing, how we could improve. or if you just enjoy us, let us know. Give that 5 stars. We like those. And thanks to all our supporters on Patreon. This episode goes live to Patreon before we upload it to YouTube, so you guys can interact with us. Let us know what you're reading, all that kind of stuff. And if you're watching on YouTube and you're like, man, I just want to yell at these guys. Why does Josh not like X-Men? What kind of take is that? Who could possibly think that about the Ultimate Universe? Well, join our Patreon and yell at us. That's what we do this for. And with that, while you're on YouTube, make sure you smash that like and subscribe buttons. You know, we're all about likes and subscribes. Otherwise, Will cries, and you don't want Will to cry. So you have
if
to.
If you don't smash that like button, you might as well just be smashing my tear ducts.
Yeah, you're smashing his heart if you don't smash that.
True.
All right. So with that, what we like to do on these, we always enjoy jumping to a lightning round, where before we talk about our main topics, we're going to go ahead and talk about what else we're reading. What else are we enjoying right now that's not our main 6 today? I'll kick it off. There is when I was growing up, one of my favorite movies, I loved Indiana Jones. I also really loved the Zorro films. Well, right now there's a comic book, Zorro, Man of the Dead. It's great. It's just starting, but it's really throws you back to that nostalgia of those movies coming out when I was a kid. And I'm like, I love this. It's fantastic. The Hades comics, Disney's Hades comics, just wrapped up. Just a nice little heist. Hades got a team together. He went on a heist. Interestingly, I'm about to record an episode on Hercules, and I think the most interesting thing I noticed is Icarus is a completely different character in this than he was in the Hercules animated series. But the comic book looks like it's drawn more after the animated series style than the movie style. So I think they had to have the series in mind when they made this. So I'm kind of interested why Icarus is so different. I'm trying to think what else I've been reading. I haven't been reading too much new, mostly because I've realized that I could just go to the library and find old graphic novels that I've missed out on over the years. So I've been going back. That's why one of my picks is an older one, The Invisible Kingdom. This time I want to talk about the G. Willow Wilson wrote. Catching up on her Poison Ivy series. It's been fascinating. And I have right now on hold something Will's been waiting for me to read for a long time. Kingdoms Come. So I'm finally going to read Kingdoms Come.
Kingdom Come. Just one kingdom.
Yeah.
Kingdom Come, not
just
plural.
One?
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to read it for just one. I need them to up the stakes.
Yes, you do. You will love it. Oh man, the art, the religious overtones. Yeah.
Nice.
There's an old preacher in it. You're gonna love it.
All right, Will. What's your lightning round picks?
Yeah, speaking of Kingdom Come, there's Marvel is doing a book called Avengers Twilight, and it's kind of old man Steve Rogers with a very kind of Kingdom Come feel to it. Kind of the new heroes, new generation of police state has kind of arisen and is in charge of things. And you got the old heroes like Luke Cage and Steve Rogers, kind of like, they don't. Back in the day, we were the heroes. How do we make a difference? I guess we didn't make a difference. But then Steve Rogers, the super soldier serum kind of ran through his body, so he's now like a really old man. But Luke Cage convinces him to take another dose just so he can kind of inspire people again with the way the world has gone. So it's pretty cool. It's going to be a limited issue of around 5 issues. But man, if you like Kingdom Come, if you like post-apocalyptic kind of stuff, then you're gonna like it. You're gonna like it a lot. And then I'm really Jason Aaron, one of my favorite creators and authors, hopped over to DC. He's at DC now doing the big 2, Superman and Batman. So he's got a Action Comics where he's bringing in Bizarro, not one of my favorite Superman rogue galleries, but or villains, but man, he's making me really like this guy and or intrigued by it. So Action, and then he's doing a book called Batman Offworld, where he sends Batman into space and fights aliens, and it's really cool.
Right, yeah, I can get behind that. All right, Andy, do you have any picks for the lightning round before we get into our main 6?
Sure. So a couple of current books that I'm enjoying. Fantastic Four. Ryan North is, I think I've decided, is who I'd like to be when I grow up in terms of being a science communicator. is just fantastic. And the Fantastic Four right now is just it starts out with a fun little mystery, and then it just every issue is a fun little sci-fi high concept story, usually just kind of one and done. He just has so many great ideas, so many clever things to play with. So that's been a really fun book. I've only read the first issue on Marvel Unlimited, but the new White Widow book. If you like Florence Pugh as Yelena in the MCU, it is, you know, they've clearly rewritten that Yelena character in the comics to just be Florence Pugh. And so if that was your thing, it is more of that in comic book form. And then for the library folks, I've been getting into Time Before Time. It's an image book, time travel, kind of got a Looper vibe. If you've seen the Rian Johnson movie Looper, it's got some elements kind of similar to that. That's been fun. And on my mind, because my kids are thinking about college, I will always be a fan of Giant Days. John Allison, Max Aaron, just a fun kind of slice of life kids in college story that is just absolutely delightful in every panel.
Yeah, I've never heard of that one. Never heard that one. I feel like I'm steeped again. Like that's why we do this. It's just my geekology. I feel like I'm very steeped in pop culture and in comics. And then someone brings up a recommendation or a comic I've never heard of. So what was that last one? Kids and Got, what was that called?
It's called Giant Days. It's out of the UK. I think it's
Okay.
Boom publishes it in the US. I could be wrong, but John Allison and Max Aaron are the creators. I think there was a different artist early on, but for most of the run, those are the folks.
Yeah, I got kids in college. I got 2 kids in college. So yeah, I'm interested in that.
I forgot to mention Mortal Terror is one that I picked up. That's Dark Horse. The art style is very much like Mike Mignola Hellboy stuff, which is why I picked it up, and it's a lot of fun. If you like horror comics, Mortal Terror is good. Okay, with that, we gotta get to our main 6 today. Also, what you guys don't know, one of the fandoms that I don't want to say proud that I'm in. That I'm in. My Little Pony. They have 6 main characters that are called the main 6, but it's like mane, you know, like a horse's mane. Yeah. So every time I say main 6, I'm like envisioning that spelling. Yeah. Sorry, I apologize.
Do they live in Maine? Do they live in Maine as well?
No, they live in Equestria, obviously.
Okay, obviously.
Or actually, they live in Ponyville, but it's under the rule of Equestria.
Gotcha.
You know, kingdoms and stuff.
Gotcha.
Today, I am excited to discuss my favorite author still doing things. I can't make this work. Here we go.
Yeah, there we go.
All right. Invisible Kingdom by G. Willow Wilson and Christian Ward. I love the covers. There's 3 different volumes I saw in the library, and I'm looking through it, and I was like, okay. There's a bunch of stuff that I'm actually reading from G. Willow Wilson because I realized there was some stuff that I've missed. This actually won an Eisner, apparently, an Eisner Award. I had no idea. Mm-hmm. I didn't even know what those were till like last year, so how was I supposed to know that?
What is it? What is it for our people who don't know out there? Just what is an Eisner? What is an Eisner? It is a. What would you say? How would you?
Oh, it's when they give little plastic trophies from Amazon to people that we like. No?
It's like the Oscars for comic book writers. It's like the Grammys for comic writers. It's the top award that any comic book creator could do. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. You baited me.
Anyway, I love this series. This is one that I want to convince Will to read at some point and just do a whole bonus episode on it. If he hasn't, have you read this one yet?
I picked up the first couple issues when they came out in single issues because, like, oh, G. Willow Wilson, I like her. I like sci-fi. I read the first couple and I liked it, but it was one of those things that didn't catch me enough to where, like, I'm going to bring it onto my pull to push somebody off my pull. When I add something to my pull, I have to push something off. So that is something that I do. But since you're lifting this up in its graphic novel form, I'd be happy to read the graphic novel and talk with you about it, of course.
That's great. Andy, have you read The Invisible Kingdom?
It looks like I read the first 2 volumes. I think there are 3 total. Is that right? Yeah. I think that was one of the things I was reading, and then work got busy and kind of got away from
that's
reading some things. So I should probably get back to finishing that up.
No, I started it last week or the week before. I think it was the week before. and I couldn't put them down. I just read it all the way through. It's
Nice.
all of the things that I like. It like just checked all the box, and it checks all the boxes for what we're doing on systematic ecology this year. It has politics, it's got religion, and sci-fi and comics, and it's like, wow,
Boom.
this is wild. It's crazy. So you start off with kind of two separate storylines that kind of end up merging together. You have Wes, who is becoming a nun, and the way they spell nun is None, but they're joining a monastery, and she's becoming part of a religious order that's all about letting go of your possessions, letting go of everything. Very Buddhist in that kind of sense, but also reminiscent of some of the Christian stuff I've been told. Like, we don't need things. Our call is a different kingdom, our call is a different way, that kind of thing. Also, there's a lot of elements from Islam, obviously, because G. Willow Wilson is Islamic. So you have a lot of stuff like the veil being worn. I love all the religious beats. I find it really fascinating, especially someone who studied world religion in college. I love it. I think she did phenomenal, just creating its own little sect in space. And to me, it seems like it should have been very Star Warsy, because that's what the Jedi are, is like a religion in space.
Mm.
But the Jedi are more a religion in space. No, this is like a full-on religion, not like very much into the same kind of models that our world religions today take, I feel like. And then the other set of characters are working for this company Lux, and they're transporting cargo. And what ends up happening is the cargo team find some documents and stuff that is basically transferring money that they shouldn't know about. Top secret stuff they accidentally stumbled on because they had a mishap with their ship. At the same time, Wes, I'm terrible with names, guys. She also discovered a similar document of money coming into the monastery to her religious leader. And it's like, well, wait a minute. We don't need money. We're not supposed to have these things. Didn't you say that this isn't important? All these other things. And to her, it was confusing. Why are we engaged in this transfer of money and this kind of stuff? And it turns out that, of course, it's the same money. This religious order keeps saying that this company is evil. They're all about possessions. And I think the company's just basically Amazon. But, it's all about everybody's materialistic and we need to, boycott this. And yet the religious order is actually taking money from it. So you kind of have this trading of money behind the scenes. But what everyone, in the public knows is the company hates the religious order because they think they're just a bunch of crazies. And the religious order hates the company because they're making everybody materialistic. But really, they're kind of working together to just funnel your money to
working
themselves.
With empire? Religion working with empire?
Yeah.
That's happened a few times.
Oh, man. And it's what's fascinating is then you get to where this ragtag team, they all come together, and you have these people who always thought that the world was right, like the way of the world, material, all that stuff was good, and they found out that their system was corrupt, being teamed up with this girl who's joined this religious order, who thought that she knew the way, and she really believes all these things fervently, like you do if you're part of a religion, and found out that her religious leaders are corrupt and all this stuff. And so you see them kind of struggling against both sides together throughout this. And a lot of the times, actually, the politics are what saves the day. They're just very slow to help because, the government's like, well, we can't step on the organization because that's where half of our donors and money and supporters come from. And if we attack the religion, then everyone who's, fond of the religious people are not going to support us. So how are we going to do the right thing if it's going to remove us from power? It's all about power and wealth, really. But then you see this team, and especially Vess, I love her, especially because when she still chooses to wear the veil after she realizes that her leader is corrupt and all this, and they question her like, oh, well, now it's all crazy. Why are you still doing this? She goes, just because they were wrong doesn't mean the way was wrong.
Wow.
And for me, in my own time, seeing all this stuff about religious leaders coming out in our world, all this stuff of who's doing what with the pandemic, who's doing what with our politics in our country, man, yeah, a lot of times you're left in this world of, oh, so everything I grew up taught in this religion was taught by people who maybe weren't the best. And then you're like, do you give it up, or do you realize that the way is more than just the religious leaders? It's good stuff. I love the theme for this. If I'm going to rate this series 0 to 10, probably an 8. You know, it's not my all-time favorite. I love the themes. I think it has a lot of important things to say. Not necessarily the most fun comic book I've ever read, but I love the themes. I love what she had to say. So, really enjoyed this one.
Nice.
All right, y'all have any questions or anything before we move on to what's
No,
next?
just that, again, G. Willow Wilson is the creator behind Miss Marvel, and then after she left that book and kind of left her character into other hands at Marvel, went on to other things, and this book and other books, and then she's currently writing. What is the fantasy book that we like, Joshua?
Oh, Hunger in the Dusk is
Hunger in the Dusk.
fantastic.
So
That's
she's writing
actually that should have been my lightning round. That's
well, there
my
you go.
favorite.
That's next time,
man.
because it's still out
Yeah.
there being written. So that's a pretty good series if you like fantasy.
Yeah.
And man,
So
what a good
far,
writer she is.
I think G. Willow Wilson has written my favorite superhero comics, and then also my favorite fantasy comics, and now it also looks like probably my favorite sci-fi comics are by her. So
There
I
you
don't know.
go.
Whatever she does, she speaks my language, man.
We got to get her on Systemicology one day, or lead her parent
so
to
good.
Comic Con.
She's so
Who
good.
knows? Who knows what could
She's so good.
happen? And she does approve. She did. I did see where she approved that Miss Marvel's a mutant. So anyway, just throwing that out there. Throwing that out there.
I don't love it, but it's not that I don't love it because it doesn't make sense. A lot of people are like, oh, this doesn't make sense, blah, all this stuff. Mine is just more, I don't care about the X-Men. Now that she's a mutant, I'm forced to deal with the X-Men, and I don't want to deal with the X-Men.
We'll convert you. We'll bring you over.
Hopefully-
There's a
hopefully
cartoon
one day.
coming out.
If I liked the X-Men, my life would be
There's
easier.
gonna be a reboot. There's gonna be a reboot. There's always a reboot, and there's a cartoon where we'll bring in. Yeah.
All right. But what we're gonna do first, we're gonna talk about. I hate that one. Why does it do that? Okay, the rise of the powers of X, or the House of X. Andy, this was your pick. You want to go ahead and tell us what this comic's about?
Sure. So I think from previous episodes, Will has given folks a little bit of a picture of what's going on in the X books, but briefly, a few years ago, just before the pandemic hit, actually, so almost 4.5 years ago, Jonathan Hickman kind of relaunched the X-Men with House of X and Powers of 10, this sort of radical reimagining of the status quo of the X-Men. They were sick and tired of being feared and hated, and they weren't going to take it anymore. And they formed their own nation state on the island of Krakoa, and kind of declared that all mutants have a safe haven there, and they're going to take charge of their own destiny, so to speak, and they're happy to live in peace with the humans. They're not going to bother the humans as long as the humans don't bother them. And of course, some of the humans do bother them. And the main conflict that Hickman set up is with this organization called Orcus. And the interesting thing there is that it's a clash sort of between biological evolution, represented by the X-Men and the mutants, and technological or cultural evolution, represented by Orcus and their development of AI and technology and so forth. Evolution is obviously a theme that's close to the X-Men. It's always been, because of the fact that it's based on mutation, but rarely does the actual science of evolution really connect well with what they're doing in the X-Men, or do they, it seems like when it gets mentioned, it's mentioned by Apocalypse, and it's this sort of caricatured, like, social Darwinism sort of thing. So I was really excited that Hickman seemed to really engaging with concepts of evolution, evolutionary biology, evolutionary science, a little bit more head on, a little bit more directly. So you have this island of Krakoa, and then later on you learn about this other island, Araco, and they used to be part of the same island, and then it split. And that's a classic, like, speciation event of one population on an island, separating into two separate islands and developing in parallel but different tracks. And so they come up with these very different cultures and societies, and all kinds of things like that. So that was the status quo for a while, and now they're looking to wrap that up. And so this conflict between Krakoa and the X-Men and Orcus is coming to a head. And so there's now another pair of books, The Fall of House of X and The Rise of the Powers of 10, or X, that are kind of paralleling that initial launch. This one is by Kieran Gillen, one of my favorite writers to contribute to the X-Men over the years. And the secret sauce that he's brought in is his take on Mr. Sinister. He wrote Mr. Sinister on his first run on Uncanny X-Men way back when they first decided to cancel the sequential numbering of Uncanny X-Men and restart with the new Uncanny X-Men #1 for the first time in 40, 50 years. And that first arc on that volume of Uncanny X-Men was Kieran Gillen writing Mr. Sinister as this scientist who was experimenting on himself and basically trying to mutate himself until he could perfectly predict everything that the X-Men had done in the past, and thus be likely to be able to predict what the X-Men would do next, so that he'd be able to thwart their every move. And I thought that was a really cool take, and again, really kind of showed an understanding of how evolution works that hadn't always been present in the X-Men. So fast forward, Kieran Gillen comes back to the X-Men as part of this Krakoa era and brings with him his take on Mr. Sinister. And the big twist this time around is that Mr. Sinister has been taking different mutants and kind of weaponizing their different powers and combining them in interesting ways. And the big one that he's been using is the power of Moira McTaggart to reset timelines. And so he's been experimenting with different things in different timelines. And then, like a video game save, he creates these different save points with these different Moira clones to be able to reset the timeline wherever he wants to go back and try something else. And that really just kind of pushed all my sci-fi buttons. So there was a big story, Sins of Sinister. It was kind of a thread all through Immortal X-Men. And now it's coming to a head here in Rise of the Powers of X. And I don't want to don't want to spoil too much, and it's just the beginning of the end of the story. So I don't know exactly where all it's going. But yeah, just the sci-fi elements, the character of Mr. Sinister, the way that they've introduced, different versions of Mr. Sinister that go back. And, there's the Mr. Sinister who always had the red diamond on his forehead. And it turns out that there were actually 4 of them with the 4 different suits of playing cards, trying out different paths, different ways to become a omniscient hive mind or omniscient intelligence outside of space and time. They're trying to become these dominion things that Jonathan Hickman had introduced in House of X and Powers of 10. And so, yeah, I don't know exactly where it's going, but I've just been really excited about the developments along the way. And this book has some of the alternate timeline stuff that the X-Men are always so good at. You get to see slightly different versions of the characters. So on the cover there, you've got an older Synch, who's sort of the Professor X character. You've got Kamala Khan, who's now one of the leaders of the X-Men, as Captain Krakoa. You've got a Death Seed enhanced Kitty Pryde. And yeah, so that's always fun to just see different people's sort of different takes on where the future of the X-Men could go, different variations on the characters. Time travel, high concept sci-fi. It's all the stuff I love about X-Men comics. So I'm really excited about where this is going to wrap up. How Gillen and Al Ewing and some of the other folks who have been writing these books are going to bring it all to an interesting conclusion.
So real fast. So is Rasputin 4? Is that like a mutation from Sinister, like pulling people together? Because it's like all my favorite characters in one person. You got Colossus, you got Ileana, you got Nightcrawler. You got people all pulled into this one character, like mutated together.
Yeah. So back in Powers of 10, one of the miniseries that Hickman wrote way back at the beginning of this era, he introduced this idea that Sinister was combining mutant genes from different characters in this future timeline. Just Powers of 10 was set in different 10, 100, 1,000 years into the future. And it was 100 or 1,000 years in the future. Sinister was taking different X genes and combining them to combine powers in one person. And one of those characters was named Rasputin. And she comes back in Sins of Sinister she's got 5 different X genes all combined. She's known as Rasputin 4. I'm not sure why the numbers don't quite match up there. But yeah, so she was a character from this alternate future timeline in the Sins of Sinister crossover that managed to come back through a plot device to be in the present main timeline. And so now, she's everybody's favorite new X-Men character because, she combines all the coolest parts of, Ileana Rasputin and Colossus and Kitty Pryde and Nightcrawler and all that.
And you're right. Like, the X-Men have been around for so long. So probably a reason why Josh doesn't care or whatever. There's just so much there. How do you get in? Where's your jumping in point? And so there's like Superman and Batman. There's only so many stories you can tell with the X-Men that they're persecuted. There's a villain. There's humans are against them, and da 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 da. But Hickman comes in with this high concept sci-fi stuff to reboot the whole thing. And that new mutant Moira, her like the power mutant she has, and when she dies, she's reincarnated, but she remembers everything she experienced in previous life. So even in the womb, she's remembering her whole life before. So she's plotting out in the womb for months, like how she's going to plan out her next life. She only gets 13 of them. 13 somehow is revealed.
10 or maybe 11 if she makes the right choice at the end was
Right.
the line from.
So it's not like an unlimited amount of wishes for a genie, but she has like 10 tries to get it right to figure out. And so she keeps failing and come back. And that has been such a fun new thing, a new take on X-Men or a mutant power that was very fresh. And so as the Age of Krakoa was coming along, for me, I loved all the books, but of course Marvel's making money. So they have like 10 different X books. And I was just going, wow, I can't read everything, can't do everything. It's falling a little stale for me. And now they're rebooting again by the fall of this, and then probably another reboot. So I'm curious to see after this series, as I'm reading it, how they'll reset the X-Men for the future, in not with Hickman, but maybe with somebody else. So that's what I'm intrigued with. If you don't like the X-Men or X-Men stories, just wait a few years. They're going to reboot. They're going to bring in a new creator, and they'll start over again. A good jumping in point.
Well, they're bringing in a new editor for the X books after this all wraps up too. So.
Yeah.
Tom Brevoort, who's been over on the sort of more Avengers side of things for many years, is now going to be in charge of the X line. So that should be a big,
I'm excited.
A big shift.
Speaking of characters that I haven't cared that much about before in the past, we can go ahead and jump over to Superman Lost. I always hated Superman. See, X-Men I was always indifferent about. Superman I just did not like at all. Like, I disliked Superman growing up as a kid. It wasn't until recently with the Jonathan Kent stuff that I was like, okay, maybe Superman's okay. I loved Jonathan Kent, but I was like, Clark Kent, meh. And this series, Superman Lost, finally won me over to a full-fledged Clark Kent fan. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I wouldn't quite give it a 10 out of 10. But man, it's got to be close. It's got to be like a 9.8 out of 10 or something. This series was fun. And it went places I didn't expect it to go. If you've been following the show for any period of time, I've been talking about this for a while. It starts off like a space odyssey through convoluted nonsense. Superman ends up transported somewhere else in space. And you end up finding out that whatever happens takes about 20 years. So from Lois's perspective, she woke up one day, Superman wasn't there. The next day, boom, he's back. Okay, it's only been about a day or two. And he tells her he's been gone for 20 years. So we're kind of going through, seeing what happened, trying to make sense of this. And man, it's been a fascinating story. It starts off just space odyssey fun. He meets some dolphins that go through space. He meets all kinds of just crazy, wild nonsense. But he ends up at a place, like about halfway through, he ends up on a planet that because of political blah nonsense, they're killing their own sun, which is, of course, weakening him as it becomes a red sun before it hits supernova, which is where he ends up with the classic suit of the series. If you've seen that like white glowing suit he's been wearing for this series, it's a suit that was made so that he could absorb more of the sun so that he still has some power. So some sci-fi fun involved there. But the people of this planet don't want to be saved. They keep saying no, and he's struggling with how can he save people that don't want to be saved. And when it's their own choices that's causing the things to happen, he can't just force them to make different choices. And he's going through, he meets a Green Lantern, and you're like, oh, whoa, the Green Lanterns are going to get involved. Nope, it's just someone who found a Green Lantern ring, and apparently this is something that you guys might know better than me because I don't know anything about the rings. But apparently it was a ring before they purified it of yellow. So before, not all that got involved. Yeah, I don't know anything about this. But fear was still a driving factor for this. So ironically, the character's name was Hope, which is, I'm thinking, right, is the blue ring. So that was kind of weird. She ends up with the willpower ring, the green ring, but still has yellow in it. So she's kind of driven by fear of her world. And they become really good friends. they kind of make you question whether or not they had a relationship or not, which was weird because you're like, it's Clark Kent. He can't be with anyone that's not Lois, right? Um, and Yellow got a hold of her. There was a whole fight scene. He ends up in being evacuated from the planet. He sees an older version of himself. Sorry, there's a lot of stuff I'm going through. Nonsense happens. You're going to have to read the comic for yourself. Nonsense happens. He ends up back on our Earth around 6 or 7, issue 6 or 7 out of 10, which was weird to me because I thought this was just going to be Space Odyssey. But then they spend the last 3 issues really struggling with trauma, struggling with identity issues, struggling with Lois is having to say, hey, wait, this is not my Clark Kent. I woke up one day, he's here. The next day, you're not here anymore, because he has this survivor's guilt where he's like, why didn't I save them? He befriended this Green Lantern and he's like, I left her to die. And man, really pulls at your heartstrings with that. He's questioning if he even is who he's always thought himself to be, if he's going to let that planet die. Because of time dilution plays a big role in all this. He's like, I can't really go back. There's no way to make it back. That's already dead. And man, lots of nonsense happens. In the end, thanks to time travel, he kind of is able to get the older version of himself back, but the version of him that had to deal with the survivor's guilt and the trauma and all that just kind of dies. Kind of. Not really, but sort of. Because he realizes he needed to, for Lois, he had to get the Clark Kent she knew back. Also, a little bit for Lex. Lex had a whole entire plot where he was trying to get Superman to be himself again because Lex is like, what's going on? I did all these bad guy stuff and Superman didn't stop me. This isn't right. At one point, Lex tries to give Lois cancer because he's like, yeah, if I hit his heartstrings, they'll come after me. Like, Lex is trying everything. And yeah, Superman just is not the same. And man, I just love how they went from dealing with this whole Space Odyssey fun to kind of dealing with greenhouse and are we destroying the environment to transitioning into the story about identity and survivor's guilt and trauma and all that kind of stuff. And I just loved all the themes, all the big stuff here. It was a fun space adventure with dolphins in space, but man, it was also something that got a little deep and made you think. And I loved this series. I thought it was great.
Who's the creative team behind this, Joshua?
Christopher Priest and Carl.
Ah,
I don't know how to say that last name. I'm sorry.
Christopher
But it was
Priest
good.
has a good run on
I've
Black
heard that name
Black
before.
Panther as well, way back
Okay.
when. And kind of definitive run of Black Panther. But yeah, like you talked about how you're not liking not caring about Superman, because he can be seen as like the big boy scout who has all the powers and never defeated, very few weaknesses, and he's the OG. He's been around a long time. But I think when you get a good Superman story like this one and others, even Kingdom Come, it goes into that. You go into kind of the mindset, the survivor's guilt. There's a lot weighing on his identity as this Messiah savior Superman who can save everyone, but he has to wrestle with a lot in terms of responsibility and family and relationships and who he saves and doesn't save and what his limitations as an individual. Like he's not God. As Superman is, he still has limitations and wrestles with things. So I think when you get a good story wrestling with his brain and heart, then that is where you can go with Superman, which I think sometimes the movies try to go there, but sometimes miss the mark. So I'm interested to see what James Gunn does with him, and being a team player and all those kind of stuff. But yeah, I've heard good things about the book. I haven't read it, but I definitely want to read the trade now that it's out, because that's a good selling point.
Yeah, now that it's finished, everybody needs to be looking for that trade. And I even thought about Christian, our other host, Christian Ashley, because there's a lot of themes about hope and what is hope. And when Superman doesn't have his powers, does Clark Kent need Superman? Is Superman Clark Kent's hope?
Yeah.
And there's even a moment of Lois saying, I might not get Clark Kent back, but these people need Superman because Superman is hope. And it's just kind of like, oh man, there's so many deeper things. Like it's so wild how it goes from like that first half of, I'm just reading this because Superman's dealing with dolphins in space. Superman's seeing this weird little AI follow him around, bothering him in the middle of black nothingness. And then all of a sudden you're sitting here dealing with these really deep questions and you're like, what? Okay. And man, it was a ride and it was great. I loved it. So please, if you see the Stray back, pick it up, guys. Superman Lost, good stuff. And with that, we're gonna go to Andy's other pick before we go to the Ultimate Universe. The
Okay.
headliner. We're making Will wait
You
so
can.
we can
I'm
talk
chomping at the
about
bit. That's okay.
Avengers Incorporated, Avengers Inc. I don't know if I'm saying this right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, by Al Ewing maybe and Leonard Kirk. I should just let you guys say the names. Andy, tell us about this pick.
Yeah. So Al Ewing wrote a couple of miniseries before this. One was about one was called Ant-Man. One was called The Wasp. Um, the first one was a time travel story that connected all the different Ant-Men, an early Hank Pym, Scott O'Grady, and Scott Lang, and what's the other O'Grady, whatever his name is, and across time, and of course Ultron's involved and so forth. And that was a fun, interesting kind of sci-fi story. And then the Wasp miniseries was more of an investigative kind of team up, looking into something from the Janet Van Dyne's past, and also brought in Nadia Nadia Van Dyne, who was a recent creation. I think Jeremy. Will, I think you had some connection to Jeremy, who created that character.
Yeah, he's a UNC grad and then a local here to Chapel Hill in Durham, and is a part of the North Carolina Comic Con. Jeremy Whitley.
Whitley, yeah.
Yeah, or Whiteley. He's usually at the Comic Cons and has written a number of books. He has his own own stuff and some kids books. Princeless is one. He has daughters, so he's writing that. But yeah, graduated from UNC creative writing and then got into the business and now creating some characters for Marvel. Pretty fun.
Yeah, so the those two Wasp characters team up in that book, and then so that kind of led into this Avengers Inc. book, which I think didn't do itself any favors by being called Avengers Inc. because that's kind of a confusing name. It's actually kind of a noir detective story building off of that Wasp miniseries with Janet Van Dyne as kind of the main detective, and she's got a kind of noir tinged narration going through the whole book, and she's investigating a mystery that turns out to be connected to Hank Pym. That's kind of the big reveal at the end of the first issue, is that he's back. He was thought dead, or merged with Ultron, but he seems to be back. And so what's going on there, and what does that have to do with this series of supervillain deaths? And so, also in the first issue, a Wasp villain, Whirlwind, it seems to be murdered, but then comes back to life, but with a completely different personality, and calling himself Victor Shade, which is an old alias of the Vision. And so the two of them, this new Vic Shade and Janet Van Dyne, team up to investigate his own death, or was it a death? Why, who is this new Victor Shade person? And then a further series of murders takes place, and so that each issue is kind of a new murder mystery of the week or the month kind of deal, and it all kind of comes to a head. So this, I think, it was originally intended to be a longer series, more of an ongoing series, but this fifth issue was the final issue. And you wouldn't really know it if you hadn't read kind of the interviews or things elsewhere that it was supposed to go on longer. It really kind of wraps up in a very satisfying story, especially if you read the other two miniseries. They all kind of hang together as one big story that works pretty well. And yeah, one of my all-time favorite comic book runs was when Peter David was doing X Factor Investigations. I like that kind of mixing of murder mystery or detective stories with superheroes and superpowers. And so, bringing some of that back. Leonard Kirk was an artist for part of that run, and he's the artist here. So that kind of helped to bring it together. I know that Hank Pym is a problematic character, has some complicated parts of his past. But what I really connected with, the way that some writers have written him, is how he is just sort of a scientist for the pure joy of being a scientist and studying things. And like, he studies ants because ants are interesting, and I can really kind of relate to that. And in the movie, the Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, when he comes in towards the end, leading his army of giant ants, and just kind of having his moment of, I've been doing this my whole life and nobody ever else really got it, but ants have saved the day. Like, to me, that was just kind of a nice, fun vindication of, science for science's sake.
Yeah.
And science for the joy of learning more about the world. And so, that's not maybe a central theme of this, but it's certainly there. The kind of, inquisitive nature of the character, and the pluses and the minuses of that. So yeah, it's a fun mystery story. It's some different kind of characters. All in the end, a lot of the ant and wasp related characters come in. Nadia comes back. Scott Lang and his daughter Cassie Lang show up. So if you like that sort of tiny corner of the Marvel universe, this is a place where they're all hanging out.
Cool. Yeah. And Wasp was the one that came up with the name Avengers originally. So
yes.
Yeah.
That's another element of the series, is kind of her history as the chairwoman of the Avengers and so forth.
I love that. And Al Ewing is had a famous run on Hulk called the Immortal Hulk, and then he's now doing Immortal Thor, so he's the creator on that. So he's a good his good history with some of those Avengers characters and really the nuance of them, and gets in their head a little bit too. So I picked up the first issue of that comic, but then again, like, what am I going to drop in order to pull this on? And knowing it probably is a limited series, we'll pick up the trailer later on. But you've sold me on again, another graphic novel to pick up and read, and all in one sitting rather than waiting month to month.
Yeah. I was slightly disappointed it wasn't a Avengers Monsters Inc. crossover, but that story also sounds fun.
We can do that.
Yeah. But also, next time, Marvel, looking at you. You got those Disney plugs that
need that's that the crossover everybody's asking for.
Yeah. or just me. That's fine, though.
That's right.
Oh, man. Oh, well, so, Andy, if you had to rate this 0 to 10, where would you put it?
I think I'd give the whole the series as a whole somewhere around a 7. Really solid. Enjoyed the mystery of it. Enjoyed the characterizations.
All right.
Good art.
Fun stuff. So, before I drive Will insane, Will, it's time for the headliner. It's the reason that everyone showed up was to hear Will discuss the Ultimate Universe. All right, Will.
Here we go.
Just let us have it. Tell us about Jonathan Hickman's.
I know we have a limited amount of time, so I'm going to give an entire history of the Ultimate line.
Oh yeah, you're fine.
Marvel.
I already told my next recording I'm gonna be a little late.
Okay. But another thing, like, remember that time, Joshua, you and I met Jonathan Hickman at HeroCon in Charlotte?
I do remember that, and he did not know.
We were like, we liked your book that came out this week. He goes, oh, that came out already? We were like, yeah. So he's got so many pots on the stove, so many spinning plates. He doesn't even know when his own books are coming out.
I actually I don't know if you guys can see, but right beside the giant Indiana Jones poster, that is a Moon Knight graphic novel that Jonathan Hickman worked on that he signed.
It's fun. So just real quick. So, again, with comics, how do you jump in? It's an ongoing series. It's like a long TV show, soap opera. How do people jump in? Where's your starting point? So the comic industry all the time tries to figure out how to bring in new readers, like anything. We have a long-standing thing. How do you bring in new customers, new readers, new people on board to what you're doing, whether it's the church or a restaurant or whatever? How do you get people in your doors? So comics are the same way. And after the 90s boom of Marvel Comics, very, very popular, they hit some bankruptcy, and they were not doing well. So in the year 2000, they're like, let's try something, and we're going to retell some similar stories and just we call it Ultimate Universe, the Ultimate Marvel, Ultimate Spiderman. So Brian Michael Bendis to come in, and the comics were doing so bad at that time.
I also love Brian Bendis, though.
Yeah, so he thought in an interview, he was like, yeah, I thought I was going to write some of the last Marvel comics. Maybe this is over. Maybe it's done. And so he wrote Ultimate. And so what they did is they kind of rebooted in a different universe Peter Parker and Spider-Man, and tell it a different way. It's the same kind of origin story, canon event, but in a different take, in a different way. Not all things are going to be the same that you know from like Jack and Kirby in the 60s and 70s. So, but it became a very popular line. People jumped all over it. So this ultimate line of Marvel storytelling, whether Ultimate Spider-Man, instead of the Avengers, they call it the Ultimates. You have Ultimate Fantastic Four, you had Ultimate X-Men, telling these similar stories, but in a different universe. I think that, so the main Marvel universe is the 616 universe, and if you talk about multiverse, and then the Ultimate line was 1610, and went on for a decade or two. Eventually, that became a little stale. He had popular characters like Miles Morales, who was created in the Ultimate Spider-Man universe. You also have kind of Samuel L. Jackson version of Nick Fury from the movies. It's like, oh, he looks a lot like that. So that was even before the movie came out, before they even gave Samuel Jackson a role in the MCU. He was Nick Fury in these books. And so what Marvel did is, let's consolidate and bring the popular characters from the Ultimate Universe over into the regular MCU so we can sell comics with Miles Morales and that kind of thing. And so they kind of dissolved the Ultimate Universe and brought him, and Jonathan Hickman did Secret Wars, another version of Secret Wars, and smashed the universes together, created just the Marvel Universe. Well, a couple years go by. Jonathan Hickman is now relaunching a whole new Ultimate Universe, and instead of the 161, it's called 6160. So we had Ultimate Invasion, Ultimate Reboot, all these kind of things. And so the premise is that evil Reed Richards, called the Maker, wanted his old universe back. So he started going through these timelines and figuring out a way to get his own universe back. He discovered another universe in the multiverse, and said, I'm just going to take that over and go back, and I'm going to prevent all these heroes from even being created. So Iron Man, Captain America, I'm going to prevent all Peter Parker he's not even going to be bit by a spider. I'm going to figure out a way that that's not going to happen, so that he could be the main villain and be in charge of this entire universe. So Howard Stark kind of figured this out with this deep cover Illuminati group. And so they prevented the Maker from doing this, but they stopped the Maker, but yet there's this whole universe where you should have heroes, but they're not. So Ultimate Spider-Man is an older version of Peter Parker with a family, and he's with Mary Jane, a couple kids, and something's off. The canon event didn't happen, allusion back to, Across the Spider-Verse. And so he's like, something doesn't feel right. I should be doing more with my life. And so eventually young Tony Stark shows up. He's been framed, by the way. Everybody thinks he's a villain because of the Maker. Anyway, he kind of goes and he hands Peter Parker the spider that he should have bitten him. And so as an adult, he now becomes Spider-Man, has to learn over again, what does it mean to be a hero with his family. So Christian really likes this, our resident Spider-Man expert. You can see his YouTube series on Spider-Man. But yeah, when they rebooted Spider-Man a while back and killing off his marriage to Mary Jane and deal with the devil, people have hot takes on that. Here you finally have a book where he has a family. He is married. He is in his mid-30s, I would guess, and he's learning how to be a hero. What's cool about this book, that Uncle Ben's still alive, and Jonah Jameson is still alive, and actually they're partners with the Daily Bugle. They're actually work partners.
What?
But guess who owns the Daily Bugle? Well, Fisk, Kingpin. So
Perfect.
Jameson and Uncle Ben quit. They're like, we quit. We're gonna go create our own news or do something different. And so in this universe, it's still familiar characters, but a different take on it. And that's what's so popular about Ultimate. It's like a what if. It's like a
You just sold
multiverse.
me.
Yeah, it's like a multiverse thing, but you're reading these characters you're familiar with, but in a different way. That if you don't like it later on, you can just kill it off and go back to the regular universe. But this is good, and this is sounding like hotcakes. So now the Ultimate Spider-Man covers the thing. People are like, oh, they're just retreading old material with the Ultimate Universe. But man, people, I guess, really wanted this because it's selling like they can't keep these books in the comic stores, and they're selling like hotcakes on eBay and all that kind of stuff. So So they're doing it not on Ultimate Spider-Man, they're also doing that Ultimate Black Panther. Another different take. You'll like this, Joshua. So since villains run this world and there's not many heroes, you have like Ra and Khonshu are teaming up as, are they gods? Are they just villains? To try to take over the world and take over Africa. Well, Black Panther's like, nope. And so you have this army of Moon Knights. They're almost like a police force coming in trying to take over Africa. And all of a sudden Killmonger shows up, and guess who's his partner? I guess it's Storm, because somebody can shoot lightning from the clouds, and he calls her honey. I'm like, uh-oh, Storm and Killmonger are together. Here we go. Yeah. So it's a cool, that first issue is great. There's 2 issues of Ultimate Spider-Man, 1 issue of Black Panther, and then they're going to do Ultimate X-Men. And it's Peach. How do you say her last name, Andy?
I've always heard it as Momoko.
Momoko. So Peach Momoko, who is a Japanese creator and artist, usually does a lot of covers for comic books because they're gorgeous. She's doing the writing and the art for Ultimate X-Men, and there is a character she's focusing on. One of my favorite characters that came out with Astonishing X-Men, Armor. And man, what's her name? I forgot that too. You probably know, Andy. What's Armor's Hasko? Anyway, look up on Wikipedia Armor, the X-Men, Japanese character who forms armor around her and super strength from like her ancestors or from family trees. So like this kind of idea of like ancestor devotion, but also it armors her up. She's such a cool character. So I think that Ultimate X-Men book that Peach is doing is going to focus on her, since she's a Japanese creator, focus on a Japanese character. So I'm really excited to see the X-Men take of that. So the Ultimate Universe that was there in the early 2000s, that was taken off like hotcake, they eventually got stale. People got disinterested in. They got rid of. Boom. Now they're rebooting again. And again, it's another jumping on point for people who are like, where do I begin? Where do I start? What books do I start? Well, here's a good jumping on part right here with the new Ultimate Spider-Man Ultimate Universe.
Yeah, I just put Ultimate Black Panther on my pull list while we're recording. I'm like, you know what? Let me just that's too good. Also, could you imagine if the Ultimate Universe of 2000 didn't happen? Like, who could have been Nick Fury? I mean, what if we would have ended up with someone like, I don't know, David Hasselhoff? That would have been wild.
I mean, crazy. Who would have done that?
Inconceivable.
Yeah, so you have these in that Ultimate Universe. You had Brian Michael Bendis was really where he did some creator own stuff and did his own things, but then, he's did that long run with Mark Bagley for Ultimate Spider-Man. Then you have Mark Millar, who was just getting his feet under him as a comic book creator with the Ultimates, and like, oh, wouldn't it be fun if we made Samuel Jackson Nick Fury in this universe? And then, Samuel Jackson was like, cool, yeah, I'll do that. So they brought him into the movies. As a person who collects comics and has his own pull list, to see his own face in the comics.
Samuel Jackson?
Yeah. He's a big comic fan and geek like that. That's why they brought him in. Yep. So yeah, all that was really fun. The Ultimate X-Men original from back is pretty good. Different takes on things. And you're like, we'll see. But you had Andy Kubert on that, and I think Mark Millar did that as well. Ultimate Fantastic Four was kind of fun, but eventually you get out of that an evil Reed Richards called the Maker that they brought in as a villain. He's a pretty cool villain. If Reed Richards, as smart as he is, was villain and used it for bad rather than good, that would be pretty scary and intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It also started Jonathan Hickman's obsession with characters' faces obscured by silver helmets.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Which leads into, circle back around. Charles Xavier in House Power, just wearing a massive helmet that, like, you have some strong neck to hold that helmet up. Yeah.
Well, he's using his newly found telekinetic powers.
Exactly.
Well, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up, guys. Always fun to do Comic Book Ketchup. We could always just do it forever, which is why we do it once a month. We'll come back and we'll keep talking about some of these and some more, and maybe different hosts, maybe the same host. We'll see. I don't remember. I make the schedule, but I have no idea. Anyway, so instead of recommendations, what I like to do for these is just the whole episode is basically recommendations. If you had to pick one, Will, of everything we talked about, what would you tell people they need to go pick up?
Ultimate Spider-Man. It's a good way to
All right.
start with this character that you know and love, but also a different take to it, different version. It's a fun read. The art's incredible as well. I love what's going on here.
Hmm. Hmm. Since we mentioned it, I don't think it's cheating if I say Hunger in the Dusk. So I'm going to stick with Hunger in the Dusk. I think that's of everything mentioned today. It's still the best comic of all of these.
It's really good. High fantasy.
Depending on how it ends, it might make it to the fourth comic I ever give a 10 out of 10. So we'll see. We'll see.
Cool.
Andy, if you had to pick any one out of everything we mentioned, what's going to be your pick for recommendation?
Oh, I'm most excited about the Rise of the Powers of 10, Powers of X, featuring Kamala Khan, who I am absolutely thrilled is now part of the X family. The costume design is cool. She was always supposed to be a mutant, and so it just feels like the timeline is healing itself, and things are finally right with the world.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so disappointing for me, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I will live. But guys, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, make sure you rate and review wherever you listen. Smash that like and subscribe button so that you don't smash Will's heart. Thank you, patrons, for making this episode possible and other patron exclusives that we do. We couldn't do any of this without you guys supporting the show. So once again, thank you all. And if you're not one of the patrons, consider joining them. And of course, remember one very important thing, that we're all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests. I did the wrong outro. Oh well. I don't think it particularly matters. All right, guys. Thank you all for listening. Share the faith, share the geek.